You were born, you are nurtured up to whatever, you're 6, then you get sent in the kindergarten and school, and by the time you're 18, you come out and you go to college. By the time you get out of college, you get a job, and then you retire with whatever, 65 or so, and then you enjoy your retirement somewhere at a hot place, right? That's been the model of the past. That's not working. That is absolutely not working anymore, in every respect.
Go to school, get good grades, get into college, become a professional, and work your way up the corporate ladder until you can retire with your savings or a pension. That's the plan for a lot of people, and despite what a lot of hustle bros on the internet might tell you,
now that's f***ing insane.
It's a good plan if you can stick to it. 9-to-5 jobs are picked on a lot, usually by people that need a way to sell a get-rich-quick scheme. The standard 40-year professional career has let millions of people enjoy very comfortable lives free from the stress that comes with being in business for themselves. But that is all coming to an end. In just the last 24 months, we have experienced quiet quitting, quiet hiring, work shortages, and labor shortages. What a lot of people aren't talking about, though, is how this is just the result of companies still trying to make outdated business models work in an age where workers can demand more from their employers. The establishment of the 40-year career is crumbling, and there are some employers and employees that are doing a great job taking advantage of it, and there are others that are suffering. The first trend is that despite pervasive stories about hustle culture and people making partner before the age of 30 while also building an outside business that dropships physical NFTs through the MySpace storefront, the average worker is not grinding. They are getting less ambitious. A Wall Street Journal article surveyed a range of businesses in demanding fields that are usually staffed by ambitious workers like law, business consulting, and marketing. The companies all reported challenges with getting their employees to go above and beyond, which is really corporate speak for working late and coming in on the weekends. A law firm told the Wall Street Journal reporters that typically they would have no problem getting junior associates to do extra hours to make sure time-sensitive work was completed for their demanding clients. But now, new associates have started saying no to working weekends and late nights, which is forcing the partners to bring on more staff and do the extra hours themselves. Which, let me say this, as a former investment banking associate that has put in my fair share of weekends to suck up to a partner, this is one of the most beautiful things I have ever heard.
It's wonderful. It's marvelous. I'm squeaked.
This kind of thing would never usually happen at places like this because elite legal and financial firms have an up or out policy with new associates, which means that within their first 2 years, they get promoted to senior associate or they get asked kindly but firmly to leave the firm. Unfortunately for the partners, they can't afford to get rid of new graduates because of worker shortages, so they have lost the threat of termination and the reward of promotion isn't as appealing as it once was either. In the same article, an insurance firm told the Wall Street Journal of the difficulties they had been having with getting people to accept promotions. Managers often had to coax their staff into accepting more senior positions because the staff were preferring to stay in their current roles where they could manage their work-life balance. When workers are more afraid of being promoted than being fired, it's a clear sign that things are changing. So it's time to learn how money works to see why the 40-year career is dead and why that might be a good thing. In 2020, millions of people who were never allowed to before started working from home. By avoiding the distractions of the modern office, a lot of people realized that the tasks that they were completing as a part of their jobs were that of what the anthropologist David Graeber would consider complete bullshit. Most of the office jobs had workers performing tasks that fell into one of the following categories outlined in the book by the same name. Flunkies who only served to make their superiors feel important, i.e. receptionists, administrative assistants, and doormen. You don't need someone to hold the door for you when everybody is working from home, and a sales platform switching board to do most of the day-to-day work of a receptionist. Box tickers who only exist to create the appearance something useful is being done, like creating company newsletters or organizing company culture events. And taskmasters, who exist to make themselves look busy by standing over their subordinates to keep them on task, but only ever end up distracting those workers or slowing them down because they themselves don't want to look like they have nothing left to do. Most jobs in the modern office involve doing some of these tasks, but by working from home, there's less need for them to exist. A lot of employees very quickly found out that they did not need 40 hours or more in the office every week to get their work done. They could just finish it in half the time, and all the other hours were wasted on pointless meetings that could have been an email and any of the other bullshit tasks that modern workers partake in. Work from home did not get rid of the goons, who were people like corporate lawyers who only exist to protect the company from other goons, or the duct tapers, who are the people that spend all of their time fixing the problems of everybody else. So if you want bullshit job security, try and make yourself one of these. For the employees that found a whole lot of extra hours in their day, they now had to decide what to do with it. An internal survey of 3,000 workers conducted by the software firm Qualtrics has shown what it was that people decided to do. 40% said that work had become less important to them in the past 3 years, and that they would prefer to spend the extra hours exercising, cleaning their home, going for a walk, or sleeping when they had the opportunity to. 25% said that work had become more important to them, and that they would look for additional responsibilities to take on in the spare hours. Most of all, 36% said that their career ambitions had waned, and that the typical progression of climbing the corporate ladder had become less important to them over the past 3 years. Those are some pretty smart workers, and it was creating the same problem that the prestigious legal firms and investment banks were complaining about too. Most people are no longer willing to work extra hours and accept additional stress to chase a promotion, and a lot of workers won't even accept a promotion if they are offered one because climbing the corporate ladder is not as appealing as it once was. There are 4 reasons that business analysts have identified as the leading causes of this trend. The most damaging to traditional corporate culture is that people no longer see the financial benefits of moving up the corporate ladder. Typically, managers and senior executives earn more than their subordinates, but modern salespeople, tech workers, and tradespeople are bucking that trend, especially in high-demand industries. A lot of workers are preferring to reskill into an in-demand role, where they can earn variable compensation based on the overtime hours they put in and the performance they achieve. People with experience in tech, pharmaceuticals, or finance could become managers, or they could cross-skill into sales and become salaried plus commission reps. They will get a lower base wage, but even average performers can earn $250,000 to $500,000 a year in commissions, putting them well ahead of any mid-level manager in the same industry. Doing a role where they are not responsible for the performance of any subordinates also means that they are free from the stress of dealing with workers who don't want to put in any overtime or work towards getting a promotion. Instead, they are only responsible for themselves and their work. If they want to make a lot more money one month, they can hustle like crazy and work on closing more sales or doing more overtime. If they want more work-life balance, they won't be letting down a team beneath them. Skilled, non-managerial roles in certain fields and sales roles are also safer during financial slowdowns as compared to middle managers. A company can operate without team leaders, but it can't operate if nobody is selling its product. For young workers who have lived through 2 big downturns during their careers, a job that is safe during bad times is more valuable than a job that pays a little bit more. Some really cunning workers have made junior jobs significantly more lucrative than managerial jobs by simply working 2 of them. Working from home has kicked off a new trend that is particularly popular with tech workers who work 2 full-time jobs with 2 companies simultaneously and take home 2 salaries. Entire online forums have sprung up in the past 2 years for workers to discuss this practice and share tips and tricks on how to find jobs that can be done in parallel and keep up with the workload once they've secured the roles. Some people on these forums claim to be working as many as 5 jobs simultaneously by committing 60 to 70 hours a week in their home offices. Just one job can be a lot of work, but highly experienced employees have claimed that the workload and stress of working 2 or 3 junior development roles is still less than working 1 senior development or team lead role. For motivated workers that want to put in the hours, the multiple job route is more financially rewarding, and it provides them additional job security because if they get laid off from one job, they still have 1 or 2 salaries to fall back on.
Ever since COVID started, what we've seen is that candidates are really only taking remote or hybrid jobs. To be competitive in this market, companies really do have to be either hybrid at the minimum or provide remote work opportunities.
Reason number 2 is that modern workers have more entrepreneurial ambitions than the generations that came before them. The biggest selling point for young workers in the most prestigious firms in the country are not career advancements, but instead the exit opportunities. From my own experience at 2 different investment banks, most junior bankers do not want a career in investment banking, no matter how well compensated some senior bankers can be. Most banking analysts only want to work in the industry for 2 to 5 years and use that job experience to qualify as a role as a financial executive like a CFO for a medium-sized company or work in private equity or hedge funds. Or they want to start their own company armed with the detailed industry knowledge on how to raise capital from investors and structure a business for growth. The entrepreneurial spirit is not only alive and well amongst finance bros, the rate at which people report wanting to start their own business has shot up to its highest level ever. There were a record 5.4 million business ID numbers created in 2021, with 2022 expected to have broken that record further. Sometimes entrepreneurship is not all that it's cracked up to be, and I would encourage caution to anybody thinking of giving up a stable 9-to-5 job to start their own business. But smart decision or not, people are doing it. Caution be damned. The third reason people are unwilling to chase promotions is because it ironically makes it harder for them to progress their career. This is a tricky one, so follow along here. The best way for someone who only wants to work a 9-to-5 job to increase their salary is to change companies every 2 years. Employees that stick with their companies for longer than that end up earning a mind-blowing 50% less than their peers who were less loyal and were constantly shopping around for better offers from different employers. The real trick is to do this while maintaining a good relationship with the companies and managers they move between. Getting a promotion in a company resets the clock on when a smart employee can switch companies without leaving a bad impression with their current employer. If someone is planning to make the scheduled job hop, but they are only a month into their new role after receiving a promotion, they are unlikely to get a good reference from their outgoing company, because now that company has to find a new employee for a job that was only just filled. A bad reference from a frustrated ex-manager will make it harder to land the new job and negotiate a competitive salary. If the employee just stays in their current role and passes up any promotions, they can rely on a good reference from the same manager that they worked under the entire time. The fourth reason that people are no longer willing to work for a promotion is simply because they don't want them. More people are choosing mental health and free time over money and opportunity, because being removed from the corporate bubble has made them realize that there is much more to life than making as much money as they possibly can. A lot of young workers have become disenfranchised because they realize no matter how hard they work, they are going to struggle to achieve traditional financial goals like buying a house and having a normal retirement, so they are seeking out easy work and pursuing alternative lifestyles like video gaming or low-budget travel by living in a converted van. As more workers learn of these 4 reasons to reject the traditional career promotions, companies are going to have to face some big problems. Promotions are the biggest incentives that large companies have to motivate non-executive level employees to do more than the bare minimum to not get fired. The promise of a promotion, if targets are met, is often cheaper than performance-based bonuses. Some companies pay their executives extremely high salaries, not because of the hard work they do, but because they want all of their employees to work like crazy for the chance that they too one day could be a fat cat.
Of digital marketing, and you get offered a promotion that's in IT because digital marketing has a lot of technical skills, then should I step out into IT if my goal is to be the CMO? And the answer is no, right? So if it's going to take you off your long-term path, you don't want to do that.
If people don't want the promotions or see that they will never make it to the level where they make more money for less work, then the whole system stops working and it spells the end of the traditional career. Speaking of which, there are 9.6 million job openings in America right now, and businesses are desperate to fill roles that have now been empty for months. But at the same time, you are reading endless articles about people who have applied to thousands of jobs and haven't heard anything back from companies that were supposed to be desperate for workers. So if there are so many job opportunities, then why can't anybody get a job?
But now a new report shows that some employers are spending millions just to tell people we're hiring.
Restaurants and different stores are offering incentives to get people hired because they are forced to close.
We've featured is desperate
just not
to
enough
hire
workers to meet all the jobs here.
According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, there are currently 9.6 million job openings in America and only 6.5 million unemployed people. So why not just take the openings that desperately need workers and give them to the people that desperately need jobs? Well, it's not that simple, and there are 2 reasons why companies are struggling to fill roles even when so many people are looking for a job, and 2 equally important reasons why people can't find a job even when so many companies are looking for workers. The first reason why people can't find jobs even when companies have so many open positions is because it's easier for a company to look desperate than it is for a human to. According to the Congressional Research Service, the number of job openings is calculated using a survey of 20,000 business establishments on the last day of the month to assess if a job opening exists. According to the informational guidelines, a job opening only has to meet 3 criteria to be counted. First, a specific position exists and there is work available for that position. Second, the job could start within 30 days. And third, the establishment is actively recruiting outside workers. There are companies that are constantly advertising job openings for positions that are hard to fill or are subject to high turnover. Last year, Engadget, a technology newspaper, received a leaked internal report from Amazon which revealed that the company had a staff turnover rate of 150%. That means Amazon, which has 1.6 million employees, was hiring 2.4 million people every year just to maintain its workforce. In the same year, only 1/3 of Amazon's new hires stayed with the company for longer than 90 days before quitting, getting fired, or getting laid off. With that much turnover, the company doesn't bother to remove job listings once someone gets hired to fill a role. Warehouse staff are continuously being onboarded and offboarded at almost the same rate, so hundreds of thousands of positions stay open across the country. Amazon's turnover figures were bad, but other large employers like big box retailers, delivery companies, and warehouses use the same job advertising process. These posts are mainly for low-skilled positions with equally low pay. But even if you are someone looking for a position with higher prerequisites, these numbers can still be deceiving. Amazon's hiring practices for some of their best paid and most attractive job opportunities also showed how easy it was for job opening numbers to paint the wrong picture. Another Amazon internal document reviewed by Business Insider revealed that the company's web services utility computing team posted 25,000 job openings in 2022, but only 7,800 of these positions were actually approved to be filled. This also happened in a year that Amazon was laying off more staff than they were hiring. The strategy that these companies and hiring managers are using is to constantly have positions open to attract top talent. If anybody that is not overqualified for these positions applies to them, they just get rejected. Amazon is not the only company that does this. Most of the top tech, finance, and consulting companies do exactly the same thing. Amazon is just not as good as keeping internal documents from the press. As private companies, they are not doing anything illegal, and they only do it because it does work. But it makes the number of job openings you hear companies complaining about in the media very inaccurate.
Affectionately known as JOLTS, number 9,610,000, that best estimates, and it is the best level going back to May when it was slightly higher at 9,616,000.
Compare that to the number of people looking for work. Job openings outnumbered unemployed people, but the gap is shrinking, and it's much easier to count a job opening than count as unemployed. The 6.5 million people unemployed only get counted if they do not have a job, have actively looked for work in the prior 4 weeks, and are currently available for work. According to data published by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, there are an additional 5.4 million people who want a job but are not counted as unemployed because they don't meet these technical requirements. So even though you might think it's the best time ever to get a job, the numbers are misleading, and that's just the first reason. There are much bigger problems than just the numbers. If you have been lucky enough to secure it full-time, working from home will have radically reshaped your career in more ways than you realize. Full-time working from home means that you can find lucrative job opportunities anywhere, and companies that want to keep up in the job market need to play catch-up. One strategy that has become common is to post the same job in every major city, so there's more chances for applicants across the country to see it, which lets the company be more selective with who they hire since they don't need to come into the office anyway. This can be a win-win for the employer and the employee. But for someone looking for a job, it can make it look like there are a lot more opportunities than there really are. And that's the second reason why nobody can find a job even when companies are apparently desperate to hire anybody. People are chasing ghost jobs. The job market is in a really weird place right now. People are unwilling to accept lousy salaries after being spoiled for the last 3 years, and companies are not willing to pay as much as they were because they can't. Major companies overhired during the pandemic and are now getting pressure from their investors to cut headcount and only focus on revenue-generating projects. According to a study conducted by the Harvard Business Review, this turmoil has increased the number of ghost jobs, which are jobs that are advertised that companies have no intention of ever filling. Companies do this for 3 reasons. The first is to just build up a database of talent. In the information age, having lots of data about thousands of workers in your industry is worth millions of dollars. If you are a hiring manager and a position in your company ever does really need to be filled, you can just go to your database of people that have previously applied for a job and start calling the most promising applicants. You might have to poach people from their current job if they did end up finding work, but that can still be cheaper than starting a search from scratch after the company realizes it needs a position filled. It's also useful business intelligence that is close to free to collect. By slowly sponging up thousands of applicants to do jobs that don't exist, the company can get insights on how many staff their competitors have, how much they are paying them, how many of them are leaving, and what skills they have and do not have. For the price of a job post on LinkedIn and Indeed, it's a lot of information. According to a survey of 1,000 hiring managers conducted by Clarify Capital, more than 60% of job postings have been active for more than 2 months, despite 96% of employees claiming they're actively trying to fill an open role quickly in the job advertisement. Posting ghost jobs is also used by managers who don't want to pay more for employees, but want to keep their existing overworked employees happy with the promise that new team members will be starting as soon as they find the right person. Posting ghost jobs also looks good to investors and customers because it looks like the business is growing even when it's not. It's a super effective management strategy for business, but it means job hunters can spend hundreds of hours applying for jobs and attending interviews for roles that never really existed. Now, it's much harder to feel sorry for them, but companies have become a victim of this new career paradigm as well. The first reason that companies can no longer find workers, even though millions of Americans are looking for a job, is because they have made it pointless to hire the right people. Businesses have embraced new technologies that have made it easier than ever to train people for a new role. A job like a pharmacist or bank manager used to be highly respected positions that required decades of experience and paid as well as doctors and lawyers. A pharmacist needed to know compounding formulas for prescriptions, and a bank manager needed to make discretionary decisions about who to lend money to. These were big jobs that could cost lots of money or worse if not done right. Once a company found people that were good at the jobs, it was very important to keep them for as long as possible. So it wasn't unusual for people to spend their entire career with just one company and be rewarded handsomely for it. Today, pharmacists are just there for compliance and to pull pre-made scripts the computer tells them to. Bank managers use credit scores and computer algorithms to approve or deny loans. They personally have no say in whether you get a home loan or not. This made their jobs easier, but it also made them easier to replace. So companies stopped valuing company loyalty, and they stopped rewarding it. Now it's people that don't switch jobs that are being left behind. People that switch jobs every 2 years or more, on average, earn 50% more than their peers that stay loyal to a company. The result is that people have learned to switch jobs more often. But now, companies do not want to invest any money into training new employees because they know they are not likely to stay around for very long. If companies don't want to pay for training, they need to hire people that are already skilled enough to do the role they are hiring for, but that can be hard to find. A lot of employees today are being forced to take it upon themselves to seek out skills and qualifications to remain employable through things like Excel courses, coding boot camps, sales trainings, and now AI seminars. This is on top of a growing number of jobs that now require advanced college degrees like an MBA for an entry-level analyst role. If companies can keep their standards high and still fill the roles they need, then they will win by not having to pay for staff training. If they can't, then they still win because they get to complain about how it's too hard to find workers with the right skills. Some companies can use this to justify outsourcing or hired skilled H-1B visa workers which depend on their employer to stay in America. If people working in America on an H-1B visa lose their job, they only have 60 days to find a new job at another company that is willing to sponsor their visa before they get deported. So companies have an incentive to make it look like they can't find anybody with the right skills so they can hire workers which are much more dependent on their job. It's a broken system that's bad for American workers and bad for visa holders, but it's great for companies that want loyal workers while everybody is shopping around for better deals. One thing that you have to remember about this whole situation is that companies do not want to admit that they can't find enough staff unless there is something in it for them. Signaling to investors that growth or operations could be hurt by personnel challenges will hurt a company's stock price. So a CEO has a fiduciary duty to keep that sort of information discreet, unless it can be used to benefit the company some other way. The second reason why companies can't get anybody to work for them, even when everybody wants a job, is because more skilled people than ever are choosing to work for themselves. Over 5 million businesses were created in America last year, up from just 3.5 million before the pandemic. There are more opportunities than ever to work for yourself thanks to platforms like Etsy, Amazon, eBay, Uber, Fiverr, and YouTube. These businesses are risky, but more people than ever are willing to take that risk if it means they don't have to sit through 10 job interviews for a position that didn't exist in the first place. But companies are doing mass layoffs while complaining about not being able to find enough employees. Some workers are min-maxing the system by working multiple full-time jobs at the same time, while others need to work hours of unpaid overtime at just one job. This is not to mention that the gig economy is consuming entire sections of the workforce. The 9-to-5 was created by American labor unions in the 1800s and became mainstream over 100 years ago, when jobs looked like this and this. It was revolutionary for its time. But how many of the modern problems in corporate America are caused by trying to make an outdated system fit with every single modern job?
To the U.S., 8.4 million people in the nation are working multiple jobs.
850,000 jobs. Wages went up for American workers.
Instead, they're working multiple jobs. It's called being overemployed.
And one part-time, but I need both of them to pay my bills every month, my rent and groceries, so just working all the time.
A report by the management consulting firm McKinsey & Company found that 2/3 of the average human's wealth is in the work they can do over their lifetime. Everybody has time, effort, and experience they can trade for money, and those tradable commodities are worth twice as much as all the other assets that the average person possesses. A regular 9-to-5 job has been a great way for billions of people to safely exchange a predictable amount of their time for a predictable paycheck, with predictable career advancement as they gain more experience. But this one-size-fits-all model for work doesn't fit with every job, and trying to make it work has been bad for employees and bad for companies for 3 reasons, which is causing 3 equally terrible trends in the job market. The first trend is that it makes time a worthless asset. The Ford Motor Company was one of the first businesses in America to adopt the 9-to-5 40-hour work week. Henry Ford did this to make his company the most attractive place for auto workers to get a job. This allowed him to pull talent away from other automakers without paying his workers more. In order to compete with Ford, other automakers were forced to offer the same 40-hour work week with paid overtime. Eventually, in order to compete with the automakers, other companies were also forced to offer 9-to-5 jobs so that their best workers didn't quit and go and work on the car assembly line. These auto workers had tightly defined and repetitive tasks, so unless the workers succumbed to exhaustion, they could do a consistent amount of work for every hour they spent at their post, and every additional hour would produce the same amount of output. If you work in a modern office job, you will know that your work is nothing like this. Sometimes there is a lot to do, and sometimes there is nothing to do. But you still need to be there 8 hours a day looking busy no matter what. Back when the 40-hour week was being fought for by workers' unions, most Americans worked in manufacturing. But today, most people work in the services sector, which is more diverse than you might expect. Unless you are working on a farm or in a factory, you are a service worker. And your job could be anything from making strategic corporate decisions to making coffees. Clearly, these jobs are very different, and should have a different schedule. But most of the corporate world has tried to make the 9-to-5 fit all jobs. But this doesn't work, because no service jobs have tasks consistently delivered on a fine-tuned production line. Work comes and goes as internal and external customers make demands, and that means when people are busy and need to do more than 8 hours in a day to finish their work, they are expected to work, quote, reasonable unpaid overtime. According to an ADP Research Institute study of office professionals, unpaid overtime jumped to an average of 9.2 hours per week in 2021, more than a full extra day to keep up with employer demands. But when there is little to no work to do because a project has just been completed or sales are seasonally slow, workers are still expected to put in the 40 hours a week because that's what the business is paying them for. If you're in this kind of job, your best option is to try and find something that makes you look busy. But if you don't have something to work on, you are probably going to be given meaningless tasks just to fill the mandatory 8-hour day. If this was just another story about companies screwing over their workers with outdated business practices, it wouldn't need a video. But the 40-hour work week isn't even good for companies. So it's time to learn how money works to find out why we might be in the midst of the overdue collapse of the 9-to-5. According to data from the US Census Bureau, McKinsey & Company, and compiled by Statista, growth in gig work and freelance jobs have outgrown typical permanent jobs by 500% over the last decade. Gig work apps have become very popular with unskilled workers due to their low barrier to entry and flexible working arrangements. Someone with a phone and a bike can start working for a food delivery service like Uber Eats, Postmates, DoorDash, Grubhub, or all of them all at the same time in less than an hour by filling out an online form. This has been a highly appealing alternative to minimum wage jobs that still rely on the antiquated process of handing in a resume, spending weeks doing job interviews, only to still get ghosted by a fast food joint offering $7.25 an hour for an unpredictable schedule. Gig work jobs usually also pay terribly, but people get to work as much as they want, when they want, and they can work around another full-time job for extra money. Even with all of the problems of gig work, you can see why it has become so popular. The popularity of freelancing and private contracting has also exploded. This is more popular among skilled workers who can sell their services to businesses just like an employee, but with no ongoing agreement. They are only paid when there is work to be done. Private contracts are usually an agreed-upon price for an agreed-upon outcome, like $10,000 to build a company website, but they can also be billed hourly for roles like security, administrative assistants, or on-demand workers. According to a report by the management consulting firm Oliver Wyman, healthcare workers have been one of the fastest-growing groups of workers ditching typical permanent roles in favor of working as private contractors. On-call nurses, doctors, and hospital support staff already work unpredictable hours, so they don't sacrifice much by working as contractors instead of a direct employee. According to the report, some nurses have elected to work in the temporary staffing market so they can take on fewer hours as mental health has become a top priority for workers in the industry. Private contractors in all industries are usually paid more for their time than permanent employees because the business only pays for the hours of services they actually need, which means most of the time their total out-of-pocket will be lower. With mass layoffs dominating the news cycle, people are also finding out the hard way that if they work in an at-will employment state, their 9-to-5 doesn't give them much security anyway. So, workers at all skill levels are seeing they can make more, and businesses are realizing they can cut down on expenses by doing away with the rigid 9-to-5 workday, which is the second reason it's slowly becoming a relic of corporate history. But the death of the 9-to-5 is not going to be a good deal for everybody. Unfortunately for now, businesses are going to be the biggest winners out of this shift, even if they have to pay their contractors and gig workers slightly more per hour. The first loss is benefits. If you work as a private contractor, you are becoming your own boss, which means that even though you are making more money, there is overhead that you become responsible for. Benefits like paid time off, training, retirement plans, accounting, and health insurance are going to come out of your pocket. Health insurance through a regular employer is normally far more affordable than private options. For gig workers, this can be especially tough, because health insurance premiums for people who ride motorized scooters through late-night traffic to deliver food to people's homes is simply unaffordable on the income of a delivery driver. Even if you are doing highly skilled contracting, if you don't manage these expenses carefully, you will end up with less in your pocket than if you just stuck with a regular permanent position. And your loss is their gain. According to a survey conducted by Forbes, small and medium enterprises were hiring more contract workers because it simplified their accounting and reduced the ever-increasing expenses of human resource management. It's not just small companies either. According to CNBC, contract workers have outnumbered direct employees at Google and other large tech companies since 2018, and the ratio became even more skewed during COVID. Google already has large human resources and accounting departments, so they are pursuing contract work for two other reasons. The first is that the most talented engineers have realized that they can make more money working off one-off projects for lots of companies than they could by being a full-time employee with just one company. The demand for talent during the good times meant that these companies just had to pay what these top engineers were asking. Some highly specialized engineers could bill up to $10,000 an hour for their work to these companies. Even for a company as rich as Google, it was better to pay them only for the hours. They really needed them, instead of paying them millions of dollars a year as a permanent salary for the odd project where their skills would be needed. The second reason is that during bad times, like right now, getting rid of contractors doesn't count as layoffs, so companies can easily cut expenses without technically laying off any staff. Big layoffs signal to investors and other employees that the business is in a bad shape, and that they would be better off investing their money or building a career somewhere else. There are three groups that are really going to benefit from the death of the 9-to-5. But their gain is all at the expense of one big group that statistically you are a part of, the regular workers. Entry-level workers who can get gig work are not paid well, but they weren't paid well in minimum wage jobs either. They have just gained some flexibility to work when they want. High-skilled workers who can move to contract roles can make a lot of money by working for the highest bidding company. They only lost the idea of job security that never really existed for them anyway. Companies are also taking full advantage of the death of the 9-to-5 by cutting down on their biggest expense center. The losers are regular workers right in the middle who are in roles that can't be gigified but aren't in demand enough to be contracted out. The fixed expenses of operating as a contractor, health insurance, business licensing, accounting, and everything else means it's only worth it for people earning well over the average wage. If you are earning $60,000 as a permanent employee, you would have to charge $80,000 a year as a contractor to break even. And not many businesses are going to pay that $20,000 premium for a standard job. New regulations intended to protect contractors and workers are another problem. If a contractor files for unemployment after their job is completed with a company, they can file an SS-8 form with the IRS, which can trigger an audit to determine if that contractor and other contractors working for the company meet the requirements to be counted as a permanent employee. If they do, then the company has to cover their unemployment benefits and has to provide other benefits to every other contractor in the business as well. Businesses don't want to take that risk, so they use staffing agencies to handle all the compliance for them. According to data from the American Staffing Association, most contractors now work through middleman staffing companies. For contractors working through these middlemen, it can combine all of the problems of permanent employment with none of the benefits of being a private contractor. And that's the third reason why the 9-to-5 is going extinct. It lets companies pull some creative business maneuvers. Adam Neumann, the eccentric CEO of WeWork, presided over the bankruptcy of a company that was worth almost $47 billion. He was kicked out of the crumbling company he founded, but not before making $1.7 billion from a company that never figured out how to even make a single penny in profit. Dennis Muhlenberg, the disgraced former CEO of Boeing, was fired from his position after his mishandling of the 737 MAX disaster that led to the death of 346 people. He walked away with a $62 million exit package, and he is now the CEO of a new aerospace investment company. Why the fuck does it seem like no matter how badly top executives fuck up, they can only fail upwards?
Of Moderna recently received a golden parachute of some $800 million.
He could walk away from the company with $60 million.
The former CEO of McDonald's could get a $70 million payout after he was fired for having a relationship with a colleague.
Heinz is in for a big golden parachute if the company gets sold, and he gets the boot. Heinz stands to get more than $55 million if he sells the struggling smartphone company.
If it seems to you like once you hit a certain level in the corporate world, it's almost impossible to fall back down, you would be kind of right. There are endless stories about CEOs that have bankrupted their companies only to be paid millions of dollars as an exit package before any of that money gets to investors, lenders, or even regular workers. The reason this happens so often is because it's designed to happen, and there are 3 reasons why even after these failures, most senior executives only seem to fail upwards. The first reason is corporate America's dangerous obsession with experience. You all know about companies demanding 3 years experience for an entry-level job or 10 years experience coding in a language that has only existed for 5 years. But experience is an important metric to gauge someone's ability to perform their job effectively. If you have been working as a welder for 30 years, you are probably going to weld faster and cleaner than any apprentice with a few months on the job. The same goes for everybody all the way up the corporate chain, but not by as much. The only way to gain experience as a welder is to be a welder. Likewise, the only way to gain experience as a CEO is to be a CEO. But nobody is giving out those jobs. A report by the Harvard Business Review surveyed C-suite executives and hiring boards and found that their individual technical skills have become a lot less important than the business acumen and soft leadership skills. These are not skills that normal people can acquire by climbing the corporate ladder the old-fashioned way, which is why more C-suite executives in Fortune 500 companies than ever came from backgrounds like private equity, investment banking, or corporate consulting. A survey by the workplace intelligence company On Deck compiled a list of CEOs of America's largest companies and found that most of them worked for management consulting firms before becoming the CEOs, and very few worked their way up within a firm. 7.1% of CEOs in the report had worked at McKinsey & Company before securing a position as a CEO in another company. Bain, BCG, Kearney, and Oliver Wyman, all management consulting firms, took 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th place. When CEOs are being selected from such a small pool of people that all know each other, then even if they fuck up royally, they are still placed above most other candidates. It doesn't make it any better when one of the most common tasks that management consulting firms get hired to consult on is who should be a new CEO. A team of McKinsey consultants picking an ex-McKinsey consultant to be the CEO of a company that hires McKinsey consultants happens all the time. This would be okay if these McKinsey clones made for the best CEOs. After all, a job should go to the most qualified candidate. But a study conducted by the Harvard Business Review found the opposite. The research looked at 3 metrics to rank the performance of CEOs: the total industry adjusted shareholder returns produced, the total country adjusted shareholder returns, and the total increase in market capitalization. The best CEOs were typically those from an engineering background with real skills in the field that their company operated in. Experience in general is overvalued by companies because a lot of valuable workplace skills haven't been around for long enough for experience to matter, which is why you have probably had to help your boss export a document as a PDF at least once in your career. But hiring a CEO is one of the biggest decisions a company will make. New CEO announcements have moved stock values up or down by double digits, so investors and the boards that represent them sometimes pick the safest option over the best option. And that's just the first reason why lousy performers with experience get opportunities that untested experts do not. If you make an honest mistake in your job, a good workplace shouldn't fire you immediately, especially if you have a track record of being a good employee. Sometimes this doesn't happen, and regular people are fired for stupid reasons. But it happens even more at the very top of the corporate totem pole. The turnover rate for Fortune 500 CEOs is about 10% every year. According to Fortune magazine, that number is on the rise, with a 12.2% turnover rate in 2023. According to the Harvard Business Review, the number one reason why CEOs leave their position is because they get fired, with over 70% of surveyed CEOs stepping down from the top job because they were told to by their board of directors. The same study found that the average tenure of a Fortune 500 CEO was less than 5 years, so there is clearly a lot less room for these men and women to make any mistakes. Now, they are paid a lot of fucking money, so their performance expectations should be higher than a regular employee. But another reason this happens so often is by design. The role of senior managers in a company is to set the overall direction and priorities of a company. Adam Neumann of WeWork clearly wanted to make his company prioritize attracting young alternative businesses that didn't ask silly questions like, how is this going to make money? Dennis Muhlenberg of Boeing was famous amongst staff and investors for being the CEO that got projects off the drawing board and into the sky. When the strategies of these CEOs were not met with consequences, one of the clearest ways to signal to investors that a company is going to do things differently is to get rid of the person who is responsible for overseeing the way things are done. The CEO of Boeing was not directly responsible for programming the fly-by-wire system of the 737 MAX. And if the issue had been caught in testing, he could still be the CEO of Boeing today. But he was a clear figurehead that the board could use to signal a turnaround to the market. CEOs at this level know that they will eventually be blamed for a scandal that they didn't have direct control over, and they also know that their reputation can be worth a lot to investors, so they can negotiate very hard. If you are a senior executive and you have been offered the position of a CEO at 2 different companies offering a base salary of $1 million and an options package of up to $5 million, which one would you pick? One job is at a safe, stable company, and the other is with a new company with a thin balance sheet in a risky business. You should pick the safe company because you are more likely to keep your job for long enough to make that bag. This creates an incentive for the most talented CEOs to only work in the safest companies, even though their skills would be better applied to the riskier companies that need effective leadership the most. So, if that risky company really needs you as their CEO, you can pre-negotiate an exit package before you agree to work for them. If you negotiate a $20 million exit package and you raise the company's market cap by $200 million, then that's a good deal for shareholders. And at the end of the day, it is their company. A golden parachute also protects CEOs in the case their company gets acquired. If one company buys another company, then they won't need 2 CEOs. If a CEO is going to lose their job if an acquisition goes through, they would naturally resist it, which could result in investors missing out on a lucrative deal. If the CEO of Twitter didn't have a golden parachute, he could have made it really hard for Elon Musk to purchase the company so he could keep his own job. Instead, he made it really hard for Musk to not purchase Twitter because he was in line for a $42 million payday. Musk reportedly overpaid for Twitter by around $19 billion. So that exit package for the CEO that was doing a pretty bad job of running the company was still money well spent by the shareholders. With so much security, this creates a bit of selection bias amongst disgraced former CEOs. Apart from the ones that end up in jail for criminal conspiracy or fraud, most of them have enough financial security to be very picky with their next job. If they don't get an amazing opportunity that looks like an upwards failure, it doesn't matter, because most of them have enough money that they will never need to work again, so they don't need to take a job that would be a step down. Now, if you think CEOs and other C-suite executives have a powerful negotiating position on entering and exiting the top job, then that's nothing on what they can do whilst they are CEO. Just last week, Elon Musk stunned investors by demanding that the board of Tesla give him shares worth more than $80 billion if it wants him to develop artificial intelligence within the company. These additional shares in Tesla would bring his total ownership in the company to 25%. Musk explained his demands in a post on Twitter, or X. I am uncomfortable growing Tesla to be a leader in AI and robotics without having roughly 25% control. Enough to be influential, but not so much that I can't be overturned. Musk went on to explain that unless his demands were met, he would prefer to develop AI programs outside of the company, which is something he actually already does with xAI, which is one of the 6 companies he is the head of. Musk's demands put Tesla's board and shareholders in a difficult position. The New York Times reported on this issue that the company's stock market valuation of almost $700 billion, more than twice as much as Toyota Motor, the world's largest automaker by annual car sales, is predicated in part on investors' belief that the company will lead the rest of the industry in developing cars that can drive from place to place without human intervention. Investors are also betting that advanced automation will allow Tesla to manufacture cars much more efficiently and profitably than rivals. So, if Musk publicly halts the development of AI in Tesla, the value of the company could tank, because it would be the death nail in the coffin of full self-driving and fully automated production. So, that gives investors 2 other options. The first option is to just give in. If the Tesla board does award Musk an additional 12% ownership stake in the company, that will dilute every other shareholder in the company by an equal 12%. That sucks for regular investors, but it could also be worse than just a 12% instant loss because future investors will be wary of buying stock in a company that could be diluted next time the CEO throws a tantrum on Twitter. The second option is to fire Musk as CEO, which is possible since he is only a minority shareholder in the company. But the value of Tesla is propped up just as much by Musk's cult of personality as it is by its technology. So if the board took the nuclear option, then shareholders could lose a lot more than 12% of their holdings. So there's a decent chance that Musk will get what he wants, because the power of an incumbent CEO makes him very hard to get rid of unless they are given a nice exit package or a better opportunity in exchange for quietly and amicably giving up their position. Musk has taken this power to the extreme, but even a regular CEO being dismissed instantly sends bad signals to the market. Now, if you think failing upwards is just a trick reserved for senior executives with market-moving leverage, you'd be wrong. Do any of you know what a gold watch is? A blingy way to tell time, sure, but it used to mean so much more. A gold watch was traditionally given to a worker by their employer when they retired with more than 25 years of service to that company. This little tradition has almost entirely been forgotten, however. Why? Well, maybe it's the rising price of gold or the adoption of alternative timekeeping methods, but most probably it's simply because company loyalty is a thing of the past. How many people do you know that have been working with their current employer for more than 10 years? Well, according to the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, it's actually 29% of people, which sounds suspiciously high until you consider that a vast majority of this group are made up of workers on the verge of retirement, which is important to remember for later. Amongst all workers in the US, the median was just over 4 years. In fact, multiple studies have suggested that full-time workers that stick with their employers for more than 2 years on average get paid 50% less. This is an unbelievably large gap, especially when you consider that the average of the loyal working group will be drastically inflated by senior executives in the C-suite who tend to have more tenure. In plain English, for the regular Joes like you and I, this 50% figure is likely understated. So why aren't companies stopping this? Surely, having to pay tens of thousands of dollars to advertise a position, interview candidates, onboard new staff, train them, and wait for them to get up to speed with their new role is not sustainable if it has to be done over and over again every 2 years, right? Well, you would think so. But there are a few reasons why companies don't care about employee loyalty anymore. An abundance of skill, standardization of tasks, globalization, broken corporate ladders, and of course, an ever-changing demand for different roles. So it's time to learn how money works and go into the terrifying minds of someone that works in human resources to find out what employers do actually value, so that you can get the most out of the career that you will probably be working until you are 100 years old. The first factor that is ruining the appeal of company loyalty is the easiest one to see, and that is the changing demand for different roles. If you look at your local classified ads these days, you are likely going to find a lot more companies looking for DevOps engineers and far fewer companies looking for switchboard operators. As technology develops, it is creating new jobs, while simultaneously making other jobs totally redundant. The rapid pace of this change in the modern world means that a lot of people are going to end their careers working jobs that didn't exist when they first started working. Naturally, if you are in a role that can easily be replaced by a machine or even just a piece of software, you are going to be shown the door pretty quickly, reducing the average tenure of the workforce. This goes both ways as well. A bookkeeper that realizes that they could earn twice as much as a social media manager is also likely to jump ship as well. The most sought after job amongst children these days is YouTuber. Go back just 20 years and people would think this is some kind of very specific plumber. I know this is not news to any of you, so I don't want to spend too much time on this factor, but do try to keep this in mind as we look at the other forces pushing companies away from valuing staff loyalty. Next up is the abundance of skills available to employers. Educational attainment is at all-time highs. A college graduate, for better or worse, is no longer a rarity. Companies do well for themselves by being open to these new hires for a few reasons. For starters, they are cheaper than their more tenured peers, but they naturally tend to be younger and more willing to put in overtime to make sure certain projects are delivered. An extreme example of this would be companies like the Big Four accounting firms. They offer widely recognized graduate programs that pay terribly and expect massive sacrifice. They offer these with the mutual understanding that almost none of the graduates will stay on with the company and instead seek out higher paying positions with a better work-life balance once they have committed their 2 years for their resume boost. A recent internal report found that Deloitte staff had a turnover rate of around 13% annually, potentially costing the business around $427 million a year in hiring and training expenses, as well as intangibles like project delays due to staff members leaving. This sounds bad, but both parties kind of know what they're getting into here. Deloitte gets a cheap pool of labor to bill out for a few years, and those overworked juniors get to put the graduate program on their resume so they can find a better job with a regular company. The regular companies that hire these ex-graduate program staff also love this system for 3 reasons. For starters, surviving 2 years at a Big 4 accounting firm is a good indication that they can handle a pretty big workload. They also come equipped with some genuinely useful insight. If a KPMG grad was doing consulting work in the pharmaceutical space and then later went on to work for Johnson & Johnson, they are going to be equipped from day one with the basics of how the business functions because they were directly involved with their projects in the past. Perhaps even more importantly is that they will have knowledge of how their competitors are operating. Now, I'm not talking about high-stakes corporate espionage or anything here. More just things like, oh, GSK streamlined their expense approval process by using this software. Simple little insights that can save multinational corporations millions. Now, this is not specific to just accounting firms. I only use them as one particularly egregious example. The truth is, businesses know that the best way to stay on top of their industry is to make sure they have a healthy supply of talent coming from their competitors. This becomes even more important when you consider the role of globalization. The rise in offshore service centers and a massive increase in skilled migration means that the pool of talent that companies have to choose from in almost every industry is wide and deep. It's not uncommon for companies to advertise even entry-level positions globally, especially since everybody is working from home anyway. Now, the third reason businesses love these outside hires, especially when it comes to more senior positions, is because it prevents catastrophic chain reactions in staffing. Imagine a company that made every effort to promote internally and only ever filled senior positions by promoting people from within the business. This actually sounds pretty great, but it can cause some problems. Let's say one day a senior manager in the business retires. Good for them. Anyway, a floor manager from one of the 4 departments the senior manager oversaw is chosen to replace them. And then a project manager is chosen to replace the floor manager, and a senior associate is chosen to replace the team manager. A lot of people in the business would be feeling pretty good about themselves, and in theory, this is the fairy tale example of climbing the corporate ladder. But you might already be starting to see the problems. Not only has this business lost a senior manager, but it now has 4 people in key roles that are totally new to their job all at the same time. No matter how much experience they have had, there is going to be some kind of learning curve involved in a new senior role. So, the business may be in a position where projects get delayed for months because an entire corporate vertical is completely out of action. Compare this with an alternative, where the senior manager gets replaced by an outside hire, and not only does this business not have to worry about all this nonsense, it might be pulling away a talented individual from a competitor. It's a win-win situation, although this just means that the business is winning twice. The employees can get f***ed. Now, you might argue that this is nothing new, but ironically, as businesses have been pushing for flatter organizational structures with less defined roles, it has become even harder because it gets harder to map out who exactly does what. The classic line of, "you're irreplaceable," has 2 meanings. Fortunately for companies, this external hire process has become a lot easier anyway, thanks to the standardization of tasks in the workplace. Let me ask a question to any office employees watching. What program do you use the most in your role? Probably email, right? If not, it will probably be some sort of Microsoft Suite product, and if you still don't fit into this category, then you're probably a programmer of sorts. The adoption of computers in the workplace has massively improved how productive we as individuals can be. A spreadsheet that might have taken a team of bookkeepers weeks to produce just 2 decades ago can now be created in one afternoon by an intern with Excel. Beyond maximizing man hours, it has also made most roles far more uniform. Whether you are in car sales, customer service, administration, accounting, or whatever else involves a computer, chances are that there is an industry standard software suite that gets used by most companies. So, an onboarding process that could have taken weeks to get someone up to speed with how a computer system works can now be as easy as, okay, so you say you have used Salesforce before? Here's your client list.
Pick up the phone and start dialing.
The most extreme example of this is the role of a bank manager. A few decades ago, being a bank manager was a big deal, almost on par with being a doctor or a lawyer. This was because bank managers had to decide who to give loans to and who not to give loans to. This might sound very easy in the age of credit scores, but back then, it took a very detailed understanding of how the business functions, the local economy, the national economy, regulations, and the bank's own financial position in order to underwrite the loan. Beyond this, bank managers were encouraged to develop strong relationships with local business and the community in general in order to gain their business.
Well, I think we can make you this loan.
Oh, that's fine. Will the bank need security?
No, I don't think so.
Fast forward to today, and a bank manager is a glorified customer service role. They don't make the decisions about who gets the loans and who doesn't. That gets handled by an offshore underwriting team that in turn just plugs numbers into a computer program to get an approval or a decline. Replacing a bank manager 40 years ago was a massive deal, and because the role relied so heavily on day-to-day experience and relationships, they almost needed to be replaced with someone else from the branch. Replacing a bank manager today is as simple as putting up a job posting and waiting for a line of new hopeful candidates to come knocking. Now, if this all sounds depressing, just know that it doesn't have to be. Sure, the dream of having a nice stable job for a 40-year career is probably dead, but if anything, the current reality is refreshingly honest. Companies are there to get the most out of you until a better alternative comes along, and you are there to get the most out of a company until a better alternative comes along. Switch jobs. The stats don't lie. You will be better off for it. As we saw, the only way to climb up the corporate ladder is by jumping between them. Yes, employers are going to screw you. They are a business and not a charity, so screw them back. Keep that swanky LinkedIn profile looking sharp. Accept any certifications or training that your business will pay for, and don't fool yourself into thinking that you will be rewarded for this loyalty, because you simply won't be. What do you do for a living? I'm not talking about your job title or your daily tasks. I'm talking about what you actually do, what you actually create, what you improve, what you contribute. For some of you watching, this question might be pretty easy to answer. But for those of you who find yourself working as a middle manager, overseeing a human resources team at an insurance underwriting company, well, it might be a little harder. In the last century, service jobs have gone from representing less than a quarter of all jobs to now representing nearly 80% of workers. Now, when we think of service jobs, we think of people serving us coffee, finding us a pair of pants out of the back, or carrying our bags to the hotel room. Sure, they might be an unnecessary luxury for the people using these services, but it's still pretty easy to see that they do produce value, be it in the form of a nice cup of coffee, a fresh new outfit, or promptly delivered luggage, without the need of a physio appointment the next day. But you see, the thing is, the service sector is far more broad than the name implies. It encompasses everybody from call center salespeople to CEOs. In fact, it's quite difficult these days to find a job outside the service sector, specifically because those roles require special certifications. Remember that for later because it's important. But the growth of the self-serving service sector and the subsequent rise in bullshit jobs that came with it seems a bit odd. Surely, the efficient free market would weed out these individuals that are contributing nothing, punishing the companies that bear their salary expenses while rewarding the more efficient organizations that do without them, right? Well, no. And to understand why, it's time to learn how money works in the modern day to perpetuate the existence of people who work to nothing but justify their own existence. And before we get into this quirk of modern advanced capitalism, we need to first look at Soviet communism. The Soviet Union was built on the idea of noble labor. The state said that work was honorable and dignified. The word Soviet loosely translates to a workers' council, and people took pride in their labor above all else. This caused problems when there wasn't enough work to go around amongst everybody. The drive for full employment meant that some people were given tasks that were obviously totally redundant. Factory managers hired as many people as they possibly could, because it was honorable to oversee the labor of so many of your comrades. They also feared that if they didn't give people jobs now, they wouldn't be able to get the people they did need in the future. This worker hoarding, as it became known, meant that some people were given jobs like counting endless inventories of nuts and bolts. Now, obviously, there are huge differences between the modern Western world and 1950s Russia, but there are also some concerning similarities. The theory of totally unnecessary jobs really started to gain traction after the anthropologist David Graeber published a book on bullshit jobs, in which he outlined 5 broad categories of jobs that had become more and more common. The first are what he called the flunkies. Think people like doormen, receptionists, chauffeurs, and assistants. These people exist to make other people feel better about themselves and could easily be replaced with some kind of technology. That's if they are really needed at all. Then there are the duct tapers. These are the people who work to alleviate problems that could very easily be fixed permanently. Think someone like an inventory manager that just so happens to have the system permissions to update stock levels in a warehouse, where that could have been done automatically or at the very least shared amongst floor staff. In his book, Graeber talks of a duct taper whose entire job was fixing the mistakes made by an apparently brilliant statistician. In reality, this star employee was actually hopeless, and the duct taper had to fight with bureaucracy to get his mistakes fixed before they could do any damage. This example shows that the solution to the problem is not always getting rid of the person in the bullshit job, because the duct taper themselves was probably contributing some value, but would be able to create value much more effectively had a needless obstacle been removed. The same cannot be said for the next bullshit job category on the bullshit jobs list, and that is the box tickers. The army of mindless drones that exist in big companies around the world because they make said companies appear legitimate to other big companies. Think of the people that create internal company newspapers with stories about key executives, or whatever it is that's reported on those things. I mean, nobody actually reads them, and that's the point. But if a company didn't have an internal newspaper, or a party planning committee, or a culture coordinator, then it might look like a small fry company not worth doing business with or working for. Now it's time to get to the real demons of the bullshit job world. The goons. Goons are an affectionate name to a class of jobs that actually has a negative impact on society, but make themselves necessary by simply existing. The classic example of this is in-house corporate lawyers. They don't really produce anything, but if you don't have them, then it will end up costing you more to hire external counsel to fight off lawsuits from companies that do have internal corporate lawyers. Perhaps the best example of this are patent trolls, which are basically companies that will buy up other companies with lots of generic patents, and then try to sue other companies in the hope that they will just agree to settle out in court. Even the largest companies in the world are guilty of perpetuating this negative-sum game. Apple famously sued Samsung for a patent over a rectangular phone with rounded corners. Now just ask yourself, despite what you might think about patents and intellectual property, what value was being created by the thousands of people whose full-time job it was to enforce that ruling? Beyond just the lawyers, there are people like the lobbyists who fight to simply change the rules of the game around, and salespeople who exist purely to move business dealings from one company to another while being the definition of a middleman in the process. Now, you might think that the goons are bad, but they have nothing on the worst amongst the bunch of pointless workers: the taskmasters. These are the people assigned to watch over and manage people that really don't need to be watched over or managed. Effective management does exist, especially when it's coordinating a team with a wide set of skills. But someone like a sales manager who lords over a team of people with exactly the same job title is a little bit different. At best, they are going to be an overpaid cheerleader encouraging people to work harder in roles that may themselves be bullshit. At worst, they will be distractions desperate to justify their existence by calling meetings and creating strategic mission statements that achieve nothing but pulling people away from a job where they do actually have a chance of doing something meaningful. These roles are not singular prescriptions. In fact, some specifically useless employees may find their role is a combination of all 5 of these factors. Many middle managers exist to oversee fundamentally useless departments and only have a job because a highly layered corporate hierarchy makes the bigwigs at the top of the food chain feel good about themselves. But this doesn't answer the question: how did we get here? The Soviet Union created bullshit jobs because it was obsessed with having a job for everybody, and the nation took pride in labor. But our capitalist systems are supposed to be better than that, right? Well, sort of. But we are still victims of the same bureaucracy. Sure, companies would do well for themselves by cutting down these tasks, but sometimes these incentives can be misaligned with the actual decision makers. In the same way a Soviet factory worker might hoard staff to make themselves seem important, modern middle managers will do the same. In the same way factory walls were covered in propaganda about the brilliance of Soviet laborers, LinkedIn pages are covered in self-serving propaganda about how much an honor it was for some analysts to spearhead the joint development project for streamlining customer satisfaction in the bullshit corporation multi-platform digital sales ecosystem. In the same way that the Soviet Union was obsessed with everybody having work to do, even if it meant making up meaningless jobs, modern workplaces are obsessed with everybody working their 40-hour weeks, even if it means, well, making up meaningless tasks. This is before we consider the bureaucracy. Let's get one thing out of the way. Countries like the USA are not home to the totally free markets. There are laws and regulations about how to do pretty much everything. Want to build a factory? Well, you better make sure it's in a location zoned for heavy industry. And you better do an appropriate tender for the contract to construct that factory and have appropriate insurance. And if you are shipping your products overseas, you need to make sure you pay the appropriate tariffs and excises. All of these steps involves larger institutions which will themselves harbor bullshit jobs. Now, this isn't to argue for big government or small government. Some policies really are important. And of course, some are bullshit. But companies have had a very important part to play in this whole system as well. The growth in lobbying has led to the creation of more and more legislation, which has made it such that starting and maintaining a successful business of any size is almost impossible without a team of accountants and lawyers who will help a business owner navigate this bureaucracy. You might say this is in the best interest of a large corporation, because it makes it harder for potential competitors to get off the ground, but we don't want to point fingers here. Anyway, is there a solution to this? As a society? Sure, embrace the idea that it's okay to not work 40 hours a week. The idea that a job is either bullshit or not bullshit is not entirely correct. In reality, almost all jobs will have some level of bullshit built into daily routines. If it was acceptable to say, my work is done, I'm done for the day, then it would be a lot easier to see who is contributing nothing. As an individual? Not really. The truth is, if you do find yourself in a role with a lot of bullshit tasks, you might just have to suck it up in the short term. Maybe work on a side hustle free from bullshit in your off time. Or, embrace it. There are lots of people that are very proud of their superfluous yet important sounding titles. Maybe it makes the pointless meetings or irrelevant PowerPoints easy to get through now you know it's all bullshit. Of course, if you actually do want to truly immerse yourself in, bureaucracy, and you decide that one accounting job isn't good enough for you, then go watch our videos on EVE Online. Took pride in labor.